questions that people have asked. So I want to first talk to you about what this whole campaign is about on a certain level. You know, you sent in questions about issues. So the first thing I want to say is if you go to the website at Marianne2024.com, you'll see the issue section there. And kudos to the glorious Hania Jodat, who has worked with me, and to Mark Van Landuit. And we have worked hard on these issues, the platforms, and so definitely go for the specifics. I will answer some questions tonight about specifics in terms of the platform, but if you want more detail, go to Marianne 2024 and look at the issues there. Now, what I want to start with is that we all get that the issues are not always the issue, that there are underlying issues, and that's really a core principle of this campaign, is that there is an underlying cancer, the cancer that underlies all the other problems, and that is the undue influence of money, specifically corporate money, on our government and thus on our country. And in order for us to override this, given the fact that we're not going to be able, or it's not reasonable anyway, to assume that we're going to be able to overturn Citizens United anytime soon, we need to be as focused on overriding Citizens United as some people have been concentrated over the last few years on overriding Roe v. Wade, overturning. We will ultimately need a constitutional amendment establishing public funding for federal campaigns. In the meantime, there is only one way to override the undue corporate financial influence on our government and on our lives, and that is an awakening within us. We are simply going to have to see our citizenship, our civic activism, our participation in these things at a much higher level. We're going to have to begin to see our citizenship and our participation in all of this as simply a layer of a well-lived, meaningful life. You might be aware of what's going on in Tennessee right now. You know, forget the paradigm that you're the president and then it's going to go one president going to Washington and fighting for you and taking on the fight for you. That's a very old paradigm. First of all, the president does not have a magic wand, nor should the president have a magic wand. But more than that, the answer is not simply transactional. The same forces that we have to be concerned about in Washington are alive and well in state capitals all over this country. And right now, the state capitals are absolute, you know, you have to think of them as ground zero. Just like the people in Tennessee right now really showing up for justice, for gun justice, for trans justice, for student justice, for women's justice, you know, for so many things in Tennessee and all over this country. So what I want to do is co-create with you, not fight for you. That's old. We have to do this together. No one president, no one labor effort, no one podcast, no one anything is going to do this. It's got to be a field of energy. It's got to be a revolutionary impulse of consciousness that just bursts onto the scene. Not from our particular silos. You know, our particular identities are important, but in order for this power to emerge, we have to think of ourselves as Americans, and that's what we have to remember. We have to be radically American. So the same forces with which we struggle in Washington, we struggle with those forces in Atlanta, we struggle with those forces in Nashville, in Concord, in Columbia, in Austin, all over the country. So this is not just about me, this is about us, and not just about sending me or any other candidate. You know, I think sometimes we forget, we think, well, if I show up, you know, every 2 years, or if I show up every 4 years and I elect the candidate I want, that should be enough. But it's not, because these corporate lobbyists are in the offices of these people all day, every day. Okay, so we're going to start with a few of these questions and see what we can get in the time that we are allowed to say. As I say, I'm told not to go too long. Okay, what are you going to do when you first get there? First thing I'm going to do is cancel the Willow Project. I'm sitting there, my first day in the Oval Office, cancel the Willow Project, and let's talk about why. Because the why is as important as the what. This is a time when we should be ramping down fossil fuel extraction. This is not a time for us to be ramping up fossil fuel extraction. Unfortunately, President Biden has given more oil drilling permits even than Trump did at this time in his administration. It's simply got to stop. We have simply got to transition. We have got to transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. Now, a term you often hear used that I think is really important is a just transition. In the book of Deuteronomy, justice, justice thou shalt pursue. Justice is a major pillar of all this. And that's got to be justice not only in some broad concept, but for all people, even those with whom we disagree. The reason a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy is such an important issue is because there are thousands of people who make their living directly or at least indirectly on fossil fuel extraction activities, and we must respect that this is the way these people are feeding their children and paying their rent. Now, it's also true that a lot of the activities, a lot of the professional expertise and talents and skills that are involved in the, fossil fuel extraction industries can make a lateral move. It's a lot of it's research, development, manufacturing. So those jobs must be prioritized as we shift to the development of a green economy. We have no more time left. We simply have no more time left. How many final warnings do we need to get from UN scientist panels or any others that at this point we are already at a place where many scientists would argue that we can't even avoid at this point catastrophic consequences of our irresponsibility towards the earth and greenhouse emissions and their effects on climate change. I love the hat. I am from Texas after all. Not the mustache so much, but the hat was cute. In order to make this change, we're simply going to have to make these turns. I will cancel the Willow Project. It's as simple as that. And we will begin to mobilize for a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. However, the just part will be very, very important to me. We're not going to let people fall through the cracks. When people talk about something like a Green New Deal in concept, let's just remember, regardless what you call it, there are millions of jobs to be created by this transition into a green economy, and we are going to make it happen. So we're back on this question of what are you going to do when you first get there. I'm also going to cancel all student debt. I'm going to declassify marijuana from a Schedule I drug. And also I want to talk about lowering drug prices. Martin Luther King said we need to I'm looking at all these things you're doing, and it's very, very funny to me. I don't know if all of you are seeing, but I am anyway. Martin Luther King said we have to revolutionize the economic landscape of the United States, and we absolutely have to. We need fundamental economic reform. You've probably already heard me say that. What the agenda of the corporate Democrats, someone like the president, represent is the amelioration of stress, trying to make it better for people given the fact that we do have an unjust economy. We have 20% of Americans who are doing okay in America's economy. But the problem is 20% is not nearly enough. And those of us who live on that 20%, within that 20% of people who are doing all right within the American economy, Roosevelt said it had become clear to him we must become fairly radical for a generation. Radical in the sense of American, radically American. So one of these things, of course, has to do with really getting to universal health care. President Biden has said that he would veto a Medicare for All bill if it came to his desk. We must go for universal health care. We have 68,000 Americans who die every year unnecessarily because of lack of health care. We have 18 million Americans who cannot afford to pay for the prescriptions that their doctors give to them. So underinsurance is as big a deal as lack of insurance. We have 85 million people who are underinsured or uninsured. Dr. Victoria Dooley, actually, I heard her say not too long ago that years ago when she would prescribe a treatment to a patient, the most common thing that she heard from them was, what will be the side effects? And she says now, the most common response that she hears is how much will it cost? We have 1 in 4 Americans living with medical debt. We have people, there are people listening to me right now. If they're not listening to me right now, you probably have friends who are rationing their insulin. You don't have this in a country with universal health care. You don't have medical debt. where there's universal health care. You don't have people rationing their insulin, going to Mexico or Canada, and then the political class talking about how the economy is doing well. That's a lot of human suffering that we're describing there. When you see people on the internet with GoFundMe pages to try to pay for a life-saving operation. That's obscene, that's immoral. And that's really what we're talking about here, the immorality of economic injustice. There is no reason in the world for people in the richest country in the world to have so much chronic economic anxiety. And we're gonna fix that. So this issue about lowering drug prices, first of all, there was a bill in 1980 called the Bayh-Dole Act, and it gives the government what's called marching rights. And the marching rights means that if pharmaceutical companies use any taxpayer money, and at this point, that's practically every drug made, if any taxpayer money is used in the development of a drug, then the government has the right to go in there and reduce the price of that drug to a reasonable market-based, as in not U.S. Fake market developed by the pharmaceuticals. So I would use those marching rights. I would order a full and complete audit of every single cent spent by the Pentagon. I would also call on Congress to subpoena. You probably saw Bernie talking to Howard Schultz the other day. We need more of that. I certainly support Bernie in doing that. And there are many CEOs who are in companies that are price gouging the American people. They should be brought before Congress. The other thing I would do when I first got there, I would ask Senators Cory Booker and Tim Scott, two black senators in the U.S. Senate, we're going to sit down and we're going to get a bipartisan bill, and we are going to have fundamental police reform in the United States. It must happen. Okay? All right. What are the things, are questions that you're asking? A lot of people ask about gun safety. Assault weapon ban, a federal red flag law, and we need to ban high-capacity magazines. Listen, when I grew up, I remember my father telling me the importance of the Second Amendment, saying that the government shouldn't be the ones who have all the guns. I understand that. And we don't want to go messing with the Bill of Rights. The right to bear arms is definitely a part of the Bill of Rights. However, you have a right to drive too. That doesn't mean there aren't traffic laws. You have a right to do all kinds of things, and the activity is regulated for the sake of the common good. This is the deal. The government should be brokering the balance between individual liberty and concern for the common good. So when people say, you're not taking my AK-47 away from me, my AR-15, I have a right to go into a store with it. Really? You do have a right? Well, let me tell you who else has a right. Parents have a right to take their child into that store and not feel terrified. And children have a right to go to school and not feel terrified. And I, as president, will demand that that be so. I am deeply concerned. Do you think we have a mental health crisis now? We are raising a generation of little children who go to school every day, praying that they will not be shot at school today. It's unacceptable. It is absolutely unacceptable. One of the questions has to do with transgender rights. As president, I would sign an executive order naming transgender Americans as a protected class. And I would urge my Department of Justice to investigate any situation in any state, and these situations are occurring right now, in which there is a denial of rights to transgender Americans. Some of you probably already know that I was in Tennessee last week at a protest there. So many kudos to those of you in Tennessee who are really holding a line what's going on there right now about transgender, about guns, etc. Somebody asked about abortion rights. We need to codify Roe v. Wade. We not only need to not codify Roe v. Wade, unfortunately, but codify abortion rights. The idea of the government, and I'll tell you something, and this is probably not news to a lot of you, but there are 21 legislators in South Carolina who've actually signed on to support a bill that would execute a woman who had an abortion. Now, you send me to the White House, I'm going to do everything possible with the power of the presidency to push back against this nonsense and not let it get anywhere near you. That's not going to be enough. You're going to have to stand in your own states. It should never have gotten this far. This neo-fascist authoritarian threat in this country should never have gotten this far. And I think we all have to kind of look within ourselves for a kind of normalized complacency that thought, it'll be okay, because it's actually not okay. But we're going to turn it around. But in order to turn it around, there has to be a rising up, the likes of which we haven't seen in this country in a very, very long time. Let me see what else we've got here. Anti-trans, I already said that. Private equity buying up homes in the United States. Yeah, this is a real problem. At a time when we have housing crisis, there are all these private equity firms that are turning houses into commodities, and it's absolutely unacceptable. There are different ways of dealing with this. One is to put a tax, a very high tax on doing that, so that it's not such an easy thing to do. The other thing is to legislate that private buyers, individual buyers, would have first dibs in those homes. Some people, they want to go all the way into banning private equity buying homes at all. I don't know about that, but there are certainly the steps we should take to get there. And let's see if it'll work just that way. But it's absolutely ridiculous that American people are being priced out of buying homes because private equity is buying them up. But once again, I hope that all of you can see it's the same in everything that we're talking about. It's interesting. There are two basic attacks on our democracy right now. One is from the outside, and that's this ideological, really neo-fascist stuff going on. And I want us to remember, there are so many ways in which these diseases of the spirit, quote, political diseases, would never have gotten to us the way they have if we had not had a weakened societal immune system. Each and every one of us have to begin to see ourselves. Every citizen has to think of ourselves as an immune system in our society. And that's always how it was supposed to be. We were never, we've been trained, there have been forces in this country who have gained their own power and retained their own power by turning us into spectators. And we've conspired with it because it was kind of inconvenient to have to be too involved with what was going on in the city council or what was going on in the school board or what was going on in the state capitol. Well, those days are over. Like, we get it. Like, oh my God, grace period is over. And I think this awakening is already occurring. And I'm so grateful. I know how many of you are responding to this campaign. For that reason, because we can't allow ourselves to just, decline into this pit of despair. I mean, I'm sure that the abolitionists had some desperate days, and I'm sure the women's suffragists had desperate days, and I'm sure that the civil rights workers had desperate days. This stuff's not easy, and it's also not going to happen if you just elect me president. It's not going to be that simple. It has to be what I see myself as is kind of helping to initiate a season of repair that's going to take a while, but I feel I can help initiate it. I know I can. But it's not going to be just, transactional. It's going to be all of us working in a different way. I think if I'm president, give me a chance to do a kind of chiropractic adjustment on the political system of the United States and then hand it over to a millennial, because at that point it'll be time, really. Okay. Private equity, American Disabilities Act. The American Disabilities Act was very good in its time, and it needs to be built on. There are more rights that are necessary, and there are a lot of very, very fine disabilities activists that are out there. A lot of it has to do with healthcare. A lot of it has to do with rights in the workplace. So it is right and proper that there is as much attention being given to that right now. And as president, I would continue along that way. Israel and Palestine. The United States has to, I said something before about becoming radically American. And to me, being radically American means that we are going to revisit our first principles. President John Adams said that he hoped that every July 4th we would revisit our first principles. Our first principles are written in our mission statement. And our mission statement is the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal. And what the entire trajectory of American history has been an expansion of our capacity to actualize that principle. All men given by God inalienable rights of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. We've never fully manifested that. No intelligent person would say that we have. But I remember there was a phrase used to hear, to form a more perfect union. That is the task, the responsibility of every generation. Remember, being an American is not just about your rights. It's also about our responsibilities as keepers, as caretakers of this extraordinary possibility, the ideal itself. We've always been a struggle between those who meant it and those who didn't mean it. You know, you had 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 41 of them were slave owners. So it's baked into the cake, and every generation reiterates the struggle between those who are saying, like, no, this is real and we're going to do this, versus those who, usually for their own economic purposes, have no intention whatsoever of doing so. So we went from, no, that doesn't just mean white people, also means black people, brown people. It doesn't just mean men, also means women. It doesn't just mean straight people, also means gay people, transgender. And I think we also need to really expand our minds. It doesn't just mean Americans. And our foreign policy, as well as our domestic policy, should stand on that. Whether you are Ukrainian, whether you are Yemeni, whether you are Palestinian, whether you're black, whether you're brown, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, all people created equal. And our policies should reflect that. A lot of people ask about the $3.8 billion that goes to Israel. That's already in the law. It's a memorandum of understanding. That will be there until 2028. That is determined by the law. But we absolutely have a right to use that as leverage and make sure that no money that comes from the United States in any way supports behavior on the part of the Israeli government that we feel does not align with our own principles and our commitment to the equality of all people, the safety, the security, and the human rights of all people. Let's see what else we've got here. Private equity, Restrict Act. Listen, surveillance from our tablets and everything is important, whether it's from the Chinese or from an American company. And I want to see more regulation and more protection of our privacy, whether it's American or Chinese or anyone. It's a very valid and legitimate conversation, but we don't need another Patriot Act. And so that's how I feel about that one. Will you be doing college virtual town halls? Yeah, let me tell you something. I have I'll be at Yale University next Tuesday night talking about spirituality and politics. I'll also be talking at Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan on Monday, April 24th. I raised my daughter in Michigan. I live there. I have a real soft spot in my heart for Michigan, so I look forward to going back there. But yes, I will be doing Zoom college meetings because obviously there won't be a lot of college attendance during the summer, but we can definitely do more Zoom calls, and we're going to have a youth director soon, a whole sort of department in the campaign. So please stay tuned. Remember, get on to Marianne2024.com. Make sure you sign up on the mailing list, and then you'll hear about all these things that we're doing. I'll be at Keene State College in Keene, New Hampshire on Sunday, April 16th. I'll also be in New Hampshire, April 14th to 17th. I'll be doing Radhika's Daybreaker event in Central Park. I don't have that on this list, but I think that's on
19th.
On the 19th. Also, I'll be back in New York for Earth Day, and Stephen Donziger will be joining me for that. That will be the afternoon of April 22nd. And then I'll be at Georgia State University in Atlanta on April 25th. Back in South Carolina, April 27th through 29th, and I'll be in Nevada from the 20th to from the 30th of April to May 4th. So I'm very excited to be adding some Michigan, adding some Georgia and Nevada to our already very robust campaigning in New Hampshire and South Carolina. There were also a few sort of funny questions, I thought, like, what authors and artists have you drawn inspiration from? I love people like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Whitman and all those, but I also have a real thing for the great Russian writers like Tolstoy and Dostoevsky, and so Oh no, I love that. And that's my own ethnic background too. Thoughts on psychedelics such as mushrooms and medicine. Yeah, the drug war is a tremendous failure. The whole issue should be seen as a health issue and not a criminal issue. Regulate, use moderately. Yeah. What was the moment you decided to run again? There was not a moment, there was a process. Last time there was kind of a moment. This time it was a process. I knew what I was running into. A lot of the stuff I worried about, how mean everybody can be. I'm already saying, I get it. But I hope I have a tougher skin this time. Somebody told me, I don't know if Shansa is watching, my friend Shansa, one of our team members in Nevada, said to me recently something. She said, did you know that the most successful tightrope walkers are walking without a net? And that really meant a lot to me, because it's like you just can't let your mind, I'm already on the tightrope. I'm already doing this, so there isn't any equivocation. This took a long time to get here, and people who I love and respect were part of my decision-making process, and once it was a go, here we are. And thank you, those of you who support. Do you support ranked choice voting? Yes. Marianne, how were you raised to become such a successful, strong-willed American woman? I don't know. I know that my parents, I think we're like all parents. You want your kids to be happy. I am a mom. I'm going to be a grandma soon, a couple months. Some of you are parents. Most of you have parents, and even if your parents aren't alive anymore, I know they're alive in your heart. Parenting's a tough job. And as you grow older, particularly if your parents are gone, you see your parents a little differently. And as the years go by, I have more respect for my parents. I certainly know they tried their best, and I know they love me, and I will end you with a funny story. I used to say to my mother, Mommy, my book hit #1 on the New York Times list. My mother would say, you're still not married? And then I'd say again, Mommy, my book was a success or something, and she'd say, you're still not married. And I thought about that the other day, because I thought even if we won the presidency, I'd say to my mother up in heaven, Mommy, I won, and she'd say, yeah, but you're still not married. I think that my mother's humor, but my mother's obvious love. Be nice to your parents. Be compassionate towards your parents. Now that, and I can tell you this, which some of you will see later in your life, none of us are perfect. We do our best. It's a tough gig. And I just want to end you with something related to that, actually. My presidency, if I'm honored enough that you make the way for my presidency and make it happen, because it's really up to you, will be profoundly child-centric. We need a massive transfer of resources into the lives of our children. We now know things that we didn't even know 10 years ago about the brain of a small child. So much is going on in early childhood. And we now have a situation where there are people locked out of the system. We were talking about 80% of Americans living in economic struggle. Many of those people were locked out by the time they were 10 years old. Because if you can't learn to read by the age of 10, some would say 8, and that is millions of American children in this country, then the chances of high school graduation are drastically reduced, and the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. That is unacceptable to me, and will be unacceptable to me as your president if you give me that job. We need I think there should be a Department of Children and Youth. When you were talking before about what will I do when I first get there, one of the things I will do when I first get there, in addition to auditing the Pentagon, also I want to cancel, we're going to immediately cancel all government contracts with union busting companies, and we're going to really bolster the NLRB, and we're going to really bolster everything involved with supporting unions. and reversing that trend. I'm so in support of the reemergence of labor the way it is right now. Christian Smalls and Sarah Nelson, all those people. But going back to this business about children as well, one of the first things I'll do is put together a conference where I hear from the best experts in this country on everything related to childhood. You know, John Kennedy said, in 10 years we'll land a man on the moon. You know what I'm going to say to you? Within 10 years, every public school, this is my vision, that every public school in the United States would be a palace of learning and culture and the arts. Americans used to do big things. And we need to get back around to doing big things again. You know, there's been saying for a long time in this country, just random acts of kindness. No, we don't just need small random acts of kindness, although we need those too. We need some big strategized acts of justice and doing the right thing. We do not have the justice that we need in this country. We do not have racial justice. We do not have criminal justice. We do not have environmental justice. We do not have economic justice. That is not okay. It is unacceptable. And we need to not just turn it around a little bit here and there. We need an economic U-turn. We need to revolutionize the economic landscape of the United States, as Martin Luther King said, and bring justice into places where it is currently not there. It's going to take all of us, and it's going to take time. But we can get started. And I hope you feel that this campaign is one of the ways that you get started. This campaign, you know, there's podcasts and labor efforts and everything that you do, NGOs, state house efforts. This is just part of the whole panoply that I think does represent an uprising of consciousness and behavior and activism in the United States. And if you feel that this campaign, if your heart, you know, responds and aligns, you're thinking that, yeah, this campaign aligns with what I want, then I appreciate it. I appreciate your help. Please go to Marianne2024.com. Please sign up. Please throw in $1 if you can. You know, those financial resources are important so that we can hire staff and all the things that are necessary in order for this campaign to be everything that it can be. And also, they asked me to tell you, join our campaign by texting the word JOIN to 96551. Again, they really want me to tell you this. Text us the word JOIN to a number 96551, and we will be in touch. So I want to thank my wonderful, wonderful staff and all of the people who have donated to the campaign, who have signed up to volunteer, who are already out there, supporters. It's a very exciting movement, and I'm very, very grateful that you're feeling it. And I think that's it, because I promised them that I would stop after 30 minutes. I don't know how to turn this thing off, though. Lauren, can you tell me how to turn it off? Because I don't know how. I'm so sorry. Okay, before she does it, I just want to say much love. Thank you very much. Okay, how do you turn it off?
Let's just